Hello there, all my lovely puppies. I'm adding this preamble in post because I had some Windows update issues. Windows was a little too eager for even my tastes. It messed around with Movie Maker. I did what I could. There might be some blur in the early bit of this video. Sorry about that. Hugs and kisses, of course, all my lovelies, and I hope you enjoy. Hello! I have been a very busy doggo recently. Acquiring belly rubs, chasing tails, sniffing butts, barking through the window at neighborhood squirrels. A few strategically placed lickings. But my human's been very busy too. He's been moving and has moved into a new domicile, a temporary place for himself and his things while our previously clearly marked territory is being renovated. And in the interim, here I am, still able to hop up onto a chair and make videos, though this relocation of my fluffy doghood has taken a great deal of time from my work here. I do hope that you'll excuse this and the interim, and I hope this video will be suitable evidence that my time was not all spent burying bones. Things for me should return to normality faster than you can say sudden infant death syndrome. And speaking of SIDS, you might be curious what I'm going over today. And while I make videos as I go, I can't say for certain how long this video will be. Though I do wager it'll end up being quite the long one. And I do have a reputation for my, impressive length. That being said, I think it's important for us to set the scene so that we know where to build on from there. Tannenberg, August 29th, 1914. The stench of death and smoke is thick in the air. The mud is caked between my calloused paws. My flag tail coiled as a serpent as the fellow officers of the German Empire study the lines of battle over which we fought, tooth and nail, against steely foes across the trenches. Victory is imminent, but no sense of respite soothes our nerves. Our hearts are weary with the calamitous cacophony of distant artillery reports and the clank of steel-plated machines of war. And no, wait. No. I'm sorry. That was an old screenplay of mine. I don't know how that got in there, actually. Kingdom Come Deliverance is a recently released video game, a game that was made by a studio, Warhorse, that's based in Prague, deep in the heart of the Czech Republic. Before the game was even released and coverage of it rolled, one particular developer on the team, Daniel Vavra, consistently displayed an anti-social justice, anti-diversity position in the creation of his game. Social justice warriors called him racist. They called his studio racist. They called him a terrible person because his game about being historically accurate about 1403 Bohemia didn't include black people in it. Vavra, who was born there and lives there, and who has consulted with top historians on the time period, has spent many a tweet in refutation of these social justice fanatics who would tell him that him and his historians' knowledge of their own country is wrong, and that he is immoral or bigoted for representing the truth. There's a link to a compilation of these tweets I encourage you to view in the description. It is quite the sight. Unapologetic about his positions, Vavra even made his own shirt, #based, white-privileged, able-bodied, cisgender, basement-dwelling, man-baby, virgin scum, phallocratic, MRA neckbeard shitlord. What a stud. Much to the chagrin of social justice warriors everywhere, the game sold immensely well, over 1 million copies, in less than 2 weeks. And bravo to Warhorse for that. Seems as if the ridiculous tweets like this one by No Boot Device, trying to get people to not buy the game because the dev is an asshole, didn't quite pan out as they hoped. Imagine being one of the idiots who actually didn't buy this game because you learned that Vavra followed Breitbart Tech. I mean, who would be so foolish to make a sales decision based on something so minor, so tiny, something that they know absolutely nothing about? I mean, who would be that much of a pathetic ideological cuck of a person to do something like that? I guess we'll find out. Where does our story begin today? Looks like I'm going back to the know, though this time I'm taking a slightly different approach. Oh, they're still retarded, don't get me wrong. But it seems that this time I'll be coming to the defense of someone that at one time I castigated. Glitch Please is the name of a podcast that The Know does, and on this panel, from March the 3rd, they talk about Kingdom Come Deliverance, and it is quite the discussion. So here's The Know with another fresh reminder of why perhaps those who entertain us should be the last people on the planet to open their mouths about anything related to something substantive.
What do you know? What have you heard? What do you know about this game, Kingdom Come Deliverance?
All I know is the script was massive.
Funded game?
Alright, so all Gus knows about the game is that it has a very large script. I'll keep that in my pocket for later.
Yeah, so
That's your problem.
there's some interesting things around this game in addition to the game itself, which we'll get into. But are you aware of the discussion around the game, Adam?
No.
Okay.
The discussion.
So here's what's happened with this game. And this is actually a years old discussion, but because the game is coming out now, it's sort of like re-energized. The game, it was kickstarted 2014, and the studio co-founder and creative director, Daniel Vavra, has been, to some degree, very at odds with gaming media as a whole.
Well, gee, I like him already.
He came out very pro-Gamergate when that was happening and really leaned into the controversy, wearing shirts to be like #based. It's like cis, able-bodied, white men,
man, baby, virgins
neckbeard,
come.
shitlord, like basically leaning into like a lot of the controversy there.
Alrighty, we've set the stage for an interesting discussion where we can get into the intricacies of Gamergate, we'll understand the other side's positions, we'll take a nuanced approach to the issue, and we'll discuss it like civilized people, and we won't make any rash decisions based on blind ideology.
Oh, cool. Now you let me know I'm not going to buy this game. Perfect.
Warhorse employs approximately 80 or so people. They spent years and years making this game. All of that effort, all of that work, over all of that time. Work done not only by those pictured here, but by all of those who were consulted to assist them along the way, to deliver to consumers a content-filled, mechanics-rich indie game that makes many AAAs pale in comparison. The exact thing that any pro-consumer person should want from the industry. But Gus is not pro-consumer. Gus is an ideologue. Gus does not weigh decisions. He makes knee-jerk reactions based on what he's heard about singular individuals. All that Gus knows about Kingdom Come is that it has a massive script, and even in the podcast shows pictures of how massive that script is, an extremely impressive undertaking. I even had to cut out many minutes of Ashley describing the mechanics of the game and how they function and how it all comes together. But what makes Gus decide that he's not going to buy a game? The fact that one person out of this studio, a studio of approximately 80 or so people, was co-founded by a man, and all you know about this man is that he was pro-Gamergate. Even though he clearly doesn't have any problem hiring women for his company if they're qualified. Nope. He hates women, despite the fact that he has publicly taken extremely pro-meritocratic positions, and he doesn't believe that people should be given special advantage or special privilege based on their skin color. A man who will not concede his vision for what he wants to create as a creator because of your whining and whinging about diversity, despite the fact it is counterintuitive to the whole point of the game, which is to be historically authentic. And so there Gus will sit with his latte right at the side of his Apple laptop, the stereotypical embodiment of the soy boy itself, and virtue signal to the world that he will definitely not buy this game that he basically knows nothing about, because people who start companies to create games and who have a creative vision should stifle that vision for Gus and his view of diversity and his misguided representation of what he believes Gamergate to be. Virtue signal harder, Gus. I don't know if I'll hold my breath for your comments about why Black Panther and Masquerade are awful because they don't have enough white people in them. Then again, I don't exactly expect consistency from your type.
But it sort of all started off with this conversation where someone asked him if there would be people of color in the game.
Ah yes, truly a measure of a game's greatness. The question that every gamer wants to know before a game is released. How many black people are there going to be?
Oh, right.
And he said,
Right.
There were no people of color in Bohemia at the time, so no.
And everybody nodded their heads in agreement, understanding that, of course, people have the right to make games that accurately represent the history of their people and culture.
And then that was countered by like a historian on Tumblr who specifically has...
Oh yeah, a Tumblr historian definitely is going to have more weight to what they say instead of the multiple actual regional historians who specialize in that time period that were actually hired and consulted with Warhorse, of course.
They run an account that's like people of color in media and in history.
Well, no bias there.
And was saying that there probably were, they just don't get written about.
Oh, okay, so he doesn't know.
In history books, because a lot of history is written by a bunch of old white dudes. All the popes, they were taking turns writing the history, maybe.
white
but
popes.
that
Yes, you buffoon, all the white popes, just like all of the Asian emperors of Japan, and all those Native American Iroquois chieftains. But it would probably be unhealthy for me to hold my breath, awaiting your castigation over the lack of white Dalai Lamas.
so they're not really talked about that, but they were probably there, and that not having them in is not, is whitewashing.
Well, by that logic, Black Panther is brownwashing. I mean, we do need to be consistent, don't we? Though something tells me the people who actually makes the points Ashley's talking about are probably not going to go that far. Because historical authenticity and the creative vision of the creators be damned.
And so that created a whole conversation there, because they were like, no, this is like our area, our region, like we know our history. They weren't around, so we're not having them in. Also, this takes place in a very small area.
Vavra's only mistake was thinking he could be reasonable with unreasonable people.
Like, it's like 9 kilometers squared, because at that time, traveling 9 kilometers, that was a significant undertaking. We're just gonna like hop on a bus or get in the car and go that distance. Like, it was an effort, especially if you didn't have your own horse.
That's not a small area.
Yeah, not today when you can hop in a car, but back then, when most people had to walk wherever they wanted to go, yeah, 9 kilometers is quite the trek. Traveling, especially in 1403 times, was arduous, strenuous, more dangerous than it is now, and certainly far, far more time-consuming. Add to that the fact the Czech Republic has so few people of color in it today, well, you can see why it's an ideological position people take and not a historical one.
It's not as big as like a lot of open world RPGs, but it's not small.
But when you look at it like as opposed to, say, an entire country,
Sure.
it's a limited area, and they're like, well, the chances of you encountering anyone would be, virtually nil anyway. Right. So we're just not gonna put them in. We're gonna err on the side of they weren't around.
Interesting.
Yes, it seems like they're going to err on the side of the historical realism that was substantiated by the number of historians that they contracted and learned from.
And
I do want to point out an interesting counter-argument I've seen about that.
Yep.
Health potions did not exist at that time either.
Wait, what?
And
I do want to point out an interesting counter-argumentVe seen about that.
Yep.
Health potions did not exist at that time either.
That's true. Yeah. So
They are not historically accurate.
Okay, Gus. Is the reason you're calling that an interesting argument because it's so fucking stupid? Oh, so the people who made this game about an area that they live in that wants to be historically authentic, they won't include a type of people who didn't exist during the time, as is corroborated by the multiple historians that they consulted about the issue, and specifically the area in terms of the history of the time they're trying to represent? Well, didn't they know that health potions weren't real? You can't just drink a health potion and your health bar goes up. That's not historically accurate. That's not realism. What an excellent counter-argument to the fact that in a historical game, you shouldn't portray history accurately because it has health potions in it. Just imagine being this guy at the office and they pick you to be the one in the podcast. Well, Gus, we're going to be talking about a game that aims for historical authenticity and realism. Well, my laptop is telling me that the game has health potions, which means that no amount of realism has any justification because, I bet you can save the game too. Saving the game was not realistic. You couldn't actually save your game in real life and return to it at a later date. But because health potions are in the game and they weren't a real thing in real life, that means there is absolutely zero justification for anything that the game developers attempt to do in the game to stay historically authentic. Imagine being Gus. Imagine that's your position. Imagine that's your argument. Imagine making that argument to adults, and then laughing and grinning at how clever you think you are. At least I can take some level of comfort in knowing that your audience is far more intelligent than you are, Gus. This is not, as many of you know, the first time that I have specifically called out the No for their approach to realism in games. Gus, Adam, and Alfredo clearly didn't get the memo, so I'll have to repeat myself. They're the ones with the big stages and the cameras and the shows, and I'm the one who's going to have to educate them on the matter. I expect far more substantive levels of commentary from channels who dedicate themselves to this subject. I'll be brief, Gus, because you seem like the type who would be confused by long-form commentary. And it is shocking that I would have to explain this to you when your work is in the area of video games. When a game says that it is going to be realistic, when it says it's going to focus on historical realism, any gamer with some level of brain activity does not interpret that to mean that literally 100% of every aspect of this experience will be exactly depicted in the most realistic possible way to represent it. You will respawn in a World War II shooter game, even though respawning isn't real. If you die in Kingdom Come Deliverance, you will be able to load your last game and continue your progress, even though this isn't how the real world works. There will be a heads-up display in order to convey to the player what the character in the game they are controlling is experiencing, as well as to convey statuses and conditions that a player sitting down with a controller or a mouse and keyboard at a desk or a chair would not possibly know. There are always, in video games, always, 100% of the time, concessions made to the realism attempts, because there is no escaping the fact that there is a player controlling a character in a video game that they are playing. And we will probably not escape this paradigm for a long, long time. The obvious reality, though it might not be so obvious to you, Gus, is that there has to be concessions made to the player because they are not actually in a scenario. They are experiencing it through a screen and with some level of device to input their commands. Gamers can suspend their disbelief for a wide variety of things. That's why in Battlefield 1, all of the guns are time period specific, and yet when you die, you will resurrect and go back into the battle moments later. However, if soldiers began running around with M16 assault rifles, that would break the immersion of the game, because the game is set in the years of 1916 to 1918. Similarly, if soldiers pulled out force fields or lightsabers or laser weaponry. If players complained that this would break the immersion and break the historical authenticity or at least level of realism present in Battlefield 1, would you counter that by saying, oh, well, you have a health bar, which means that it's perfectly okay to have laser weapons in Battlefield 1, because we've already thrown realism out the window. If Call of Duty World War II gave you the ability to summon orbital bombardments from starships over the planet, would you say, Gus, that this is justified because, after all, you can be shot with a submachine gun in between the eyes and still survive, and then regenerate your health in a matter of seconds? I apologize if many of you can see that this is practically what should be considered a self-evident idiocy by Gus, who giggles and laughs and fancies himself a clever man. But this is kind of the crux of one of the issues, one we'll actually have to explore in a little bit. Features and mechanics of video games exist on a spectrum, with players placing them on different rungs of importance and immersion. And if you can't stand a game that tries to be historically realistic and authentic because it has a health potion in it, then feel free to make your own game about historical authenticity in the tribes united by Shaka Zulu in Africa. It can be as realistic and authentic as you can, not even a save feature, no potions, and, on the bright side, you can put in as many black people as possible, and because it would be historically authentic, nobody reasonable would bat an eye to that.
True.
Yeah.
So when
They
I
are
say
not historically accurate.
realistic-ish.
Is there health potions?
Oh yeah, there's a couple gimmies in the game. So no magic, no dragons,
Come
but there are
on.
health potions. The other studio co-founder issued a statement recently, because they've been obviously taking a fair amount of heat over the conversation. People feeling like they were doubling down, whitewashing, all this stuff. So
Yeah, and those people are idiots. You have nothing to be ashamed of if you're doubling down on the realism of your own history that you want to represent. After all, can you prove beyond the shadow of a doubt that there were no white people in ancient China? Perhaps more importantly, what we should be asking is, would that even be a question that would be asked? If this was a game centered around the historical authenticity of, say, the formation of the Han Dynasty? Yeah, I think we all know the answer to that.
Martin Klima said And this was in January. It said, after more than 4 years of intensive research, it can be stated that there is no proof that there were no dark-skinned people in Bohemia and vice versa. So you go, all right, there's really no proof either way. No one can say for sure, yeah, you should absolutely have this in, or you definitely shouldn't because this is the way it was. It's just not a well-documented thing in that particular part of history. But then he continued, there are many things we cannot prove, otherwise we would have to assume, for example, that lions would have lived in the forests of Bohemia. After all, the coat of arms of the ruling house is adorned with a lion. Where else could people have had this portrait?
Stop comparing people to animals.
Well, I think it's more just that it makes it sound like...
Okay, this one was legitimately baffling to me, and I don't exactly know how to tackle it because it's so ridiculous and stupid. Where do you even begin? I mean, does this need to be explained? I mean, I guess it does, so here we go. Alrighty, so this is Adam. Adam isn't terribly bright, it seems. Adam can't just sit there like a lemon and let Gus hog all the virtue signaling. No, Adam has to object to the completely reasonable example that the game developer used to illustrate a point for why his historical evidence is being used in the way that it is. Gus doesn't mind, of course, because he's clapping like a seal off camera. Which doesn't surprise me, and we've already discussed why I expect very little from Gus in the way of reasoning. If Adam was smart, Adam would see what anybody with intellect would see. Adam would understand that the point being made wasn't that people of color are on the same level as animals, which is just such an insipid and ridiculous thing to pull from that example that, as I said before, it boggles the mind with its ridiculousness. Adam would instead see that the whole point of the analogy about the lions was that just because something might be depicted, those things exist within context. They exist as artistic representations or for a possible set of other factors. The analogy, by absolutely no means, was meant to imply that people of color are on the same level as actual animals. And again, I'm absolutely baffled beyond words, so much by Adam's assessment of this, that I literally had to actually fucking script this bit in a notepad app so I could keep track of myself.
Like some mythical thing.
It's not. It's a person. It's not mythical. I mean, like at the same time, I don't know, man.
Yeah, that's right. You don't know. So why don't you go back to it being quiet, or go do whatever it is Rooster Teeth actually pays you to do, because it's clearly not offer your insightful commentary.
I you know, on the one hand, I do...
It's a video
Have some
game.
fucking representation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough because it's now something that's in the back of my mind while playing.
Oh, okay. Oh, it's a video game? That fucking brilliant, Alfredo. I hadn't noticed that. The Count of Monte Cristo it's just a book, guys. It doesn't matter what's in it, and it doesn't matter if the story makes sense. The ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, I mean, it's just a painting, guys. It's just a painting. Or a fresco, or whatever. After all, what can't you justify with that? A thing is what it is, so let's just change it. You see, I don't actually understand your point, Alfredo, that you're trying to make here. Because it's a video game, what? Would you hold the same standard to anything that's created, that's a work of art? A movie? A story of any kind? A book? A tapestry? A painting? What is your point, Alfredo? We understand it's a video game. That's very insightful of you to point out to the audience. Is your point that because it is a video game, it should be held to a lesser standard than other works? Because it's a video game, should the wishes of the creators, for whatever reason it may be, not be taken into account? Should the Beya Tapestry be edited in the modern age because it doesn't properly represent the Chinese? Yes, it's a video game, and one that tries to focus on historical authenticity, and through that historical authenticity, through that historical realism, it allows for us to not just learn about history, it allows us to live it in a way that other media don't allow us to do. When Polish developers CD Projekt Red created the Witcher series, it wasn't just a video game. It was a testament to their culture, their history, their folklore, and mythos. It was a symbol to the world that would enjoy this media, that Poland and its culture was rich and full of things that could be enjoyed by almost anybody. It was for many people the first time they got to experience this Polish culture, not only with their eyes, but through the medium of a video game in a way for them to experience it in an interactive way. They could put themselves all the more easily into a world that this team created. The Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, thought so highly of this video game as a cultural icon, a symbol of Poland's national pride and accomplishment, that in President Obama's visit to the country in 2011, President Tusk gave to him a collector's edition copy of The Witcher 2: Assassins of Kings. In a return trip in 2014 to Poland, He said, "The last time I was here, Donald gave me a gift. The video game developed here in Poland that's won fans the world over, The Witcher. I confess I'm not very good at video games, but I've been told that it is a great example of Poland's place in the new global economy, and it's a tribute to the talents and the work ethic of the Polish people, as well as the wise stewardship of Polish leaders like Prime Minister Tusk. The most powerful guy in the entire world comes to your country on a visit, and you think so highly of this video game that you give one to him. Perhaps, Alfredo, if you ever do watch this, you can picture yourself as the president of a nation or as one of the many, many hands that work to build the cultural icon of pride that's being given as a gift to the most powerful man in the world. Maybe you can imagine just what it might feel like if you knew that this gift you are giving away as a symbol of your nation was made lesser, and whose creative vision was adulterated by the infectious tumor of progressivism and forced diversity, by the throngs of feeble lessers on the other side of the globe who demanded that for their sacred demands for inclusivity in spite of authenticity, the gift that you made as an icon of your nation's culture was tarnished and tainted, and you knew in your heart it wasn't as good as it could have been. Yes, it's just a video game, in the same way Casablanca is just a movie, Hamlet is just a play, 1984 is just a book, and speaking of which, I think it was in that book that Orwell wrote that he who controls the past controls the future. Alright, so if you had to drag a point out of all that, kicking and screaming, is that I wish that this channel would treat the medium with a little higher regard. And the excuse of "it's a video game" is no justification for you altering the creative vision of the creator. You see, Adam, history should be regarded as sacred. It's dangerous to alter the past on such flimsy grounds, on such ideologically motivated pretenses. I shudder at the thought that this idea comes so easily to you, Adam. You want representation? Who does? You? Who else are you speaking for, exactly? Who else are you even justified in speaking for? You, as a white person, want the representation of non-whites, even though the evidence points largely to the fact they weren't there? You don't want what you want because it's what the evidence points to. You want it because of your ideology, because of your personal desires for what you want to be true. And I sure have noticed that such behavior, such methods of thinking, is very often manifested within religions, for which social justice often displays traits of. You will have your end result. You will have your belief. And you will try to alter reality, alter the facts, in order to justify that in any way you can. Because facts be damned.
Just that they were, they were quite aggressive about this being, like there are basically like only these people in the game. It is multicultural to some degree in that there are like Germans and Hungarians.
I hate the Germans.
The Germans. They keep winning Siege.
Imagine being a guy from Czechia, being excited about a Czech game set in the 15th century Czechia with emphasis on Czech history and culture that is making it big internationally, putting your country on the map for a whole new demographic. How many games feature Czechia at all? Is history? How many games have Czechs in them? Barely any. But now, finally, there's a game that features all of that, emphasizes it, focuses on it specifically. Now imagine being that same guy, seeing a bunch of Americans reducing all of your culture, history, even your nationality to just white. This odd, nondescript white that Americans love to label every culture with. The world is bigger than the United States, and it's more than just black and white. Ashley brings up a good point. You can't just slap the label white and apply it to a variety of cultures and nationalities. Diversity is far, far more than just the superficiality of skin color.
But
What the hell are you doing?
And it's like, I get it, it's historical. I'm not expecting to, play Brienne of Tarth and, be my sword-swinging lady, because I get that probably would not have flown, historically speaking.
But Ashley, don't you know? There are health potions in the game, so anything goes, right?
And I understand it's totally great that this exists for people that like a more realistic and grounded RPG, but it's
That's kind of an interesting take, don't you think, Adam? You're talking about how it's a great game for people who like historical realism and authenticity, and yet earlier, you didn't have a problem at all with throwing historical realism and authenticity to the wolves so that you could have your representation.
Yeah, I guess for me what it comes down to is that it approaches everything and it says we want to be realistic, we want to do all this, but then are very aggressive about certain aspects of the game design, in spite of then having to admit, yeah, we actually don't know what this would have been like either way.
Yeah, I can't support that.
You know, but then saying, we don't know, we can't prove it either way, but we know.
Okay, Ashley, this is a weak point for you here, not gonna lie. Ugh, this fucking makes me frustrated. Phew. Alright. So the problem here is that you're finding it unusual and insinuating it's questionable that the developers of this game are being so adamant in their defense of their portrayal of history. They spent all of this money and budget and time and trust on the multiple historians that they hired for this game. Historians, dedicated historians, who know the time, who know the area, who are specialized in these, who are good enough at what they do that they were hired for this exact purpose. Honestly, I think that you have to be pretty dense to believe the semblance of the suggestion that based on all of that, some Tumblr-based historian knows better than all of them do, especially after saying that this person has their online presence based around people of color in history, something that wouldn't at all be a stretch to concern one as a bias for that outcome. The evidence is heavily weighed in favor of Warhorse and their portrayal of history, and is even added to in the slews of comments that are brought up on Reddit, on these videos, and on YouTube by people who consistently state that they are from the area, and that rural Bohemia is simply devoid of non-whites. And in the fact that you can look up ethnicities in the Czech Republic today and find what a tiny fragment of the population actually is non-white. Then add to that the problems with travel and history and the scale of life in the historical contexts. And look, Ashley, come on. You're putting all of that, all of these factors, down to the same level as, well, some Tumblr historians said otherwise. If this was a more philosophically oriented discussion, we could delve into what you mean by no, and that's its own rabbit hole, but when it comes to history, there is a margin of error. There's a possibility that we're wrong, that we missed a detail, that we are using bad evidence, that we're being tricked. There's always a sliver of reality that, when you go back that far especially, you could be wrong. We might not know something about history with absolute truth, but we gather evidence and build our knowledge based on that. We don't technically know with absolute certainty certain aspects of history. However, the preponderance of evidence will point to a singular fact, and that is what's happening here. As for why they're being so adamant, so defensive about it, well, that's because they were put on the defensive. They were attacked. They portrayed history in a way that they believe is correct. The way that historians and facts and evidence seems to corroborate with. They got attacked for it. They got called racists. Of course, they're getting defensive and adamant about the creative vision of their own game that they're basing in historical fact. I'm using fact colloquially here now. They're from there, they've lived there, they're historians or experts in the matter. No wonder they are adamant in their own defense. That's why they're changing the silly saving schnapps mechanic, but they will not change what is historical fact in their historical game.
And it's just, I don't know. It rubs me the wrong way a little bit because the entire premise is let's be as realistic as possible.
Seems like the only real justification for that is racism.
Seems like the only real justification for you coming to that conclusion is that you're a fucking idiot with an ideological agenda. I run across people like you all the time, Adam. You're nothing special. But hey, they'll give anybody a microphone these days.
Right? Or prejudice.
I don't know that it started out that way so much as the dude feeling like he didn't want anyone else telling him what to do with his game.
Do you think that might be a more reasonable explanation given the knowledge that you have on the subject?
And I mean, I think, you know, if it was possible to prove with historical accuracy that was the case, that's fine. You know, if that's the angle.
Yeah,
that they're
absolutely.
going
The same
with,
thing
you know.
can be said about the exact opposite position. Yeah, the evidence is weighed heavily in favor of A, but you know what? Let's go with B because it makes me feel better.
Be like this is like well documented.
Right.
You know there was no appearance of say like the Moors until this point, and so on and so forth. Then like I'd be like, okay, great, but it's not documented at all either way, and they seem so freaking certain that it was a specific way.
Yeah, Ashley, I mean, can you imagine that? I mean, all of these historians from the area who specialize in the area who are hired by this company to consult with them about history of the area that they specialize in, I mean, they sound so certain. Hurdy-dur, I'm Ashley Jenkins. Those scientists think they're all so smart, my granddaddy wasn't no monkey. That's you, Ashley. That's you. That's what you're doing. That's what all of you are doing, every single person at that table. You heard about this shit 5 minutes ago, and you've already decided that you are informed enough on the issue to reasonably believe or suggest that all of these scholarly sources who are dedicated in this field should not be believed, or that they're not trustworthy, or that the developers are racist. I mean, what, do you want a time machine?
So, I mean, it's, I will not be buying the game and supporting it. I'll leave it at that.
Reading up on the developer.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gus is reading up on that developer and finding out he's a little bit too egalitarian for Gus's taste. Better stay away from that game, you might get some of that extra testosterone through osmosis.
So,
Yeah, I can't. There's not a good enough reason to not put.
Yeah, when it comes to history, feels before reals. Ugh, I just get sick thinking about that. I mean, imagine going up to the developers of this game and saying, all of the evidence is no excuse for you not putting into the game what I think you should. When people say social justice is a religion, this is the kind of shit people are talking about. This right here.
it's messy for sure, and you know, I can't say that the game is bad per se, because like the game, it's got its own issues like bugs and that sort of thing. But other people might like the gameplay. It's selling fine.
People are vehemently in love with that game, like to the point where if you say something bad about it, they don't.
Pretty fucking stupid coming from the buffoon who moments ago had the knee-jerk reaction to call people racist because of their opinions, huh?
So, I mean,
Well,
that's
then,
fine.
you know, we may be disliked for this then. But that's fine.
Yeah.
You know, it comes down to, it's cool that it exists for the people that really like want to dive into that sort of like window into history.
But fuck them, because our version of history is so much more inclusive. Why let all that pesky evidence stand in the way of diversity or artistic freedom?
But I feel like it's selling itself as too assured of what history
Interesting
was.
point, Ashley. Let's weigh your historical credentials against all of theirs. You seem like you're in a position to doubt their expertise so justifiably. No. We're calling it there. They're done, I'm done. Another video from The Know that makes me depressed for humanity. Joy of joys. Hard to believe that Ashley was the one carrying the team there. I mean, the bar's not exactly high with Gus, Alfredo, and Adam around. Stumbled a bit there at the end, but for the most part, she's the one who carried him through. So what's our takeaway here? Well, if I had to condense it all into a too long didn't read, well, too long didn't watch, history is important. It's sacred, in a way. It's something that doesn't care about your ideological lens, your social justice taint, your diversity and inclusion nonsense. History is a testament to where we came from, the cumulative works of all those who came before us, the entire lives of humankind who by coincidence had been born long before we were. It's an insult to their memory and to their legacy and to their whole existence if we disregard so haphazardly and with such weak foundations all that they had accomplished and struggled with. Humanity before us suffered and died and learned so that we could have what we do today, better or worse, but mostly better. I mean, the guy who invented silicone should get a fucking Nobel Prize. Depiction of history is not endorsement of all the things that happened. It is arguably our moral duty to our species that we honor the truth, and that we don't let our personal ideologies or biases ruin that for all those who come after us. Imagine being Warhorse and working for so long and so hard on this game that tries to be historically authentic. And after all of the stuff that you learn, and after all the consultation that you pay for and you absorb, you release your game and people say, "Where are the blacks?" And you just be sitting there wondering what to possibly say, as a bunch of social justice warriors on the other side of the planet called you racist for portraying your history, your own history, in the best way that you felt possible, by following what the evidence and what the research led you to believe. Thanks, The No, for once again showing us that everybody can profit from a bad example. And I am certain that we will meet again.